Take this gold, it will save you. Please, madam. A single coin, I beg you.
The rain was falling hard on the streets of Madison City that cold December night. A black luxury car stopped at the red light near the old market square. Inside the car sat Richard Hammond, one of the richest businessmen in the country. He owned Hammond Industries, a company that controlled half of the textile business in the nation. He was 52 years old, proud, arrogant, and believed that money could buy anything in this world. Richard was returning from a business dinner where he had just closed a deal worth millions. He was in a good mood, smoking his victory cigar and thinking about his next conquest. His driver, Marcus, was quietly driving through the rain when suddenly something caught Richard's attention. A small figure was standing near the traffic light. It was a girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, wearing torn clothes that were completely soaked in rain. She was holding a small box of matchsticks, trying to sell them to passing cars. Her face was thin, her eyes were hollow, and she was shivering from the cold. Richard lowered his window slightly. The girl immediately ran toward the car with hope in her eyes. She lifted her small box and said, "Please, sir, buy some matchsticks." Her voice was weak and trembling. Richard looked at her for a long moment. Then a cruel smile appeared on his face. He pulled out his wallet and took out a $100 bill. He waved it in front of the little girl's eyes. The girl's eyes widened. She had never seen so much money in her entire life. Richard enjoyed watching her reaction. He loved the power he had over people, especially those who had nothing. He leaned closer to the window and whispered, "I will give you this money and more. I will give you food, clothes, and a warm bed. But first you have to do something for me." The little girl looked at him with confusion and asked, "What do I have to do, sir?" Richard's smile grew wider as he said, "Beg me. Get down on your knees in this rain and beg me to help you. Call me master and say you are nothing without my mercy." The girl stood frozen. The rain kept falling on her small body. She looked at the money in his hand, then looked at him. For a moment, Richard thought she would do it. Most people did. He had made grown men beg for business deals. He had made employees crawl for their jobs. A starving child would surely break in seconds. But something unexpected happened. The little girl took a step back. She looked directly into Richard's eyes, with a gaze that seemed far too old for her age. Then she did something that shocked him completely. She laughed. It was not a mocking laugh or an angry laugh. It was a gentle, almost sad laugh. She said, "My mother told me before she died that our dignity is the only thing no one can take from us unless we give it away. I am hungry, sir, and I am cold, but I am not nothing. I will never beg." She turned around and walked away into the rain, still holding her box of matchsticks. Richard sat in his car, stunned. No one had ever refused him. No one had ever walked away from his money. He felt something strange in his chest, something he had not felt in years. But he quickly buried that feeling under his pride and arrogance. He told Marcus to drive. As the car moved forward, Richard looked back once and saw the small figure disappearing into the darkness. He told himself she was a fool and that she would regret this night forever. Then he forgot about her. But life has a strange way of teaching lessons to those who refuse to learn. 20 years passed. Richard Hammond was now 72 years old. His company was in ruins. Bad decisions, corrupt partners, and changing markets had destroyed everything he had built. His wife had left him years ago, taking half his remaining wealth. His son had taken the other half and moved to another country, never calling him again. Richard had lost his mansion, his cars, his respect, and his health. He was now living in a small apartment in the poor side of Madison City, the same city where he once ruled like a king. He could barely afford food and medicine. The doctors had told him he had a serious heart condition and needed an expensive surgery. But he had no money and no insurance. He had begged the hospital for help, but they had refused. He had begged old business partners, but they had laughed at him. The man who once made others beg was now begging himself and finding no mercy. One cold December morning, Richard received a letter. It was from someone named Maya Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Textiles, the biggest textile company in the country now. The same industry Richard once dominated. The letter said that Miss Sterling wanted to meet him personally at her office regarding a potential opportunity. Richard was confused. He had never heard of Maya Sterling before. But he was desperate. Maybe this was a chance to rebuild something. Maybe someone remembered his old glory and wanted to help. He put on his last decent suit, which was now old and worn, and went to the Sterling Textiles headquarters. The building was magnificent, far grander than anything Richard had ever built. He felt small walking through the giant glass doors. A young receptionist guided him to the top floor, to the CEO's private office. When the doors opened, Richard stepped into a room filled with sunlight and elegance. Behind a large oak desk sat a woman in her late 20s. She had dark hair, sharp, intelligent eyes, and a presence that commanded respect. She was beautiful, but there was something about her that seemed familiar. Richard could not figure out what it was. She stood up and smiled at him. She said, "Please sit down, Mr. Hammond. I have been waiting 20 years for this meeting." Richard sat down, confused and nervous. He asked, "Do I know you?" The woman walked around her desk slowly and stood in front of him. She said, "You do not remember me, but I remember you. I remember every word you said to me. I remember the rain. I remember the cold. And I remember what you asked me to do." Richard's heart began to beat faster. His old mind was trying to search through decades of memories. The woman continued, "I was 8 years old. I was selling matchsticks near the old market square. You offered me money and asked me to get on my knees and beg you. You asked me to call you master." The memory hit Richard like a lightning bolt. He suddenly saw her, the little girl in torn clothes, standing in the rain with hollow eyes, but unbroken spirit. He whispered, "It was you." Maya nodded slowly and said, "Yes, it was me." Richard felt his whole body go weak. He wanted to speak, but no words came out. Maya walked back to her desk and continued, "After that night, I promised myself 2 things. First, I would never let anyone make me feel powerless again. Second, I would become so successful that one day even those who looked down on me would look up." She told him her story. After her mother died, Maya had lived on the streets for 2 more years. Then a kind teacher found her and helped her get into a charity school. Maya worked harder than anyone. She finished school with the highest marks. She got a scholarship to university. She studied business and started working at a small textile company. She saved every penny, learned everything she could, and slowly built her own business. It was not easy. She faced rejection, failure, and betrayal many times. But every time she wanted to give up, she remembered that rainy night. She remembered the cruel man who tried to break her spirit, and she kept going. Now, she owned the biggest textile company in the country and employed thousands of people. Richard listened with tears forming in his old eyes. He felt ashamed in a way he had never felt before. Every cruel thing he had ever done flashed before his eyes. Every person he had humiliated, every worker he had mistreated, every beggar he had mocked. He saw himself clearly for the first time in his life, and he hated what he saw. He slowly got up from his chair. His weak legs trembled, and then Richard Hammond, the man who once made others kneel, got down on his knees in front of Maya Sterling. His tears fell on the expensive carpet as he said, "I am sorry. I am so sorry for what I did to you. I was a monster. I do not deserve your forgiveness, but I am begging you. Not for money or help, just for forgiveness." Maya looked at him for a long moment. The room was completely silent. Then she walked toward him and gently helped him stand up. She said, "I did not bring you here to humiliate you, Mr. Hammond. I brought you here to tell you that I forgive you and to show you that the little girl you tried to break became everything you said she could never be." Richard broke down crying. 20 years of pride and arrogance crumbled in that moment. Maya guided him back to his chair and gave him water. Then she told him something that shocked him completely. She said, "I also brought you here because I am going to pay for your surgery." Richard looked up in disbelief. He asked, "Why would you do that? I was cruel to you." Maya smiled softly and said, "Because my mother also taught me something else that night. She taught me that kindness is the greatest victor. I do not want revenge, Mr. Hammond. I want you to live and to see what kindness can do." Richard left Maya's office that day as a completely different man. She kept her word and paid for his surgery. She even gave him a small job at her company, helping young employees learn from his years of experience. Richard spent his remaining years trying to undo the damage he had done throughout his life. He volunteered at homeless shelters. He spoke to young business students about humility and respect. He wrote letters of apology to people he had wronged. He never forgot the lesson he learned that day. A starving child he had tried to break had shown him what true strength really meant. It was not in power, or money, or making others kneel. It was in standing up when the world pushes you down. It was in forgiving those who hurt you. It was in choosing kindness when you have every reason to choose revenge. Maya Sterling went on to become one of the most respected business leaders in the country. She started a foundation for homeless children, giving them the chance she never had. Every year on that cold December night, she would stand by her office window, watching the rain fall on Madison City, and remember the little girl she once was. And somewhere in the city, Richard Hammond would look at the same rain and thank God for the child who refused to beg, and instead taught him how to be human again.